Hello and welcome to our next session of Communication Research Methods. I am Parvez Khan. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Cohort University of Science and Technology. The course code for this subject is JMC 481. The topic that we are going to discuss today is research problem. Now, obviously, this is a very important topic. We need to have a scientific approach in approaching a research problem. The objectives of this session is that students will be able to understand what a research problem is. It will enhance the students' approach in formulating and identifying a research problem, and students will be able to understand various sources that shapes or helps in approaching a particular problem in social sciences and communication research methods. So, importantly, we are discussing this again and again, but no matter how many times we talk about it, it's important to understand what is research. Basically, it's your quest for an answer, search for an answer, and solution to a problem. It is about extending your knowledge, it's just about unraveling mysteries and finding out theories or building theories. It's also to verify and testing facts, also to predict events, and also to explain causal explanations, and along with that solve problems and achieve national development, and is basically based on scientific method. Now, why we're talking about scientific method? Because the approach that needs to be done when talking about communication research, or what we call a research problem, it needs to be scientific. So no matter what we do, it's very important to consider this, that our approach needs to be scientific. And what is scientific method? Scientific method is a systematic step-by-step procedure to seek facts and theories. It relies on evidence. And basically you cannot just talk about things randomly or intuitively. It relies on certain evidence, and for that it uses certain concepts. And along with using concepts, it needs to be impartial, and what we call it objectivity is there. It requires objectivity. And when we talk about objectivity, if you're looking at things from a neutral perspective, that's also important. Ethical neutrality is important. And then formulate generalizations. You talk about things, you generalize things, you just share your statistics and your findings, and you apply it to the phenomena and make it widely available to public and researchers who want to study the phenomena. You relate it to the world, existing world. And then it's about ensuring verifiability. Is it verifiable? Can you verify the facts? And importantly, a scientific method always uses a logical reasoning. Now, this is a very important point. You cannot just write things of your own. You need a theory, you need an explanation to explain. So that's why we call this entire process a systematic scientific method. You cannot write things of your own. You need an approach, you need a guidelines, you need a certain logic in approaching a problem. So, keeping in view, look at the first point is systematic. It relies on evidence. The third is using concepts. It keeps objectivity. It follows ethical neutrality. It formulates generalization. It ensures verifiability and uses logical reasoning. So these are all important points. And if you follow all these points, your research is going to be scientific. However, this is not the key topic of our discussion today. We are going to go and we are going to find out about a problem. Now the question is, what is a research problem? Why do we have to think so much about research problem? Why this thought is important? Because obviously, if you are going to think, you are going to think about some issue, some problem, and that's how it begins. But research begins with steps. It begins with observation. You start observing things around you. You build a hypothesis. You have a tested hypothesis. You believe that this may be a hypothesis that you've tested or given, it may be true or false. Then you have a definition for something. Then you go out to gather data. And then obviously, after gathering data, you're going to analyze that data and you're going to come to conclusion. So basically, these are some of the basic steps, a scientific approach in approaching a problem, or whatever we call it, a study in communication, in the field of communication and in social sciences in general. But we are going to move from here, and we are going to today talk about uh, research problem. And for that, a scientific attitude is required. You need to be a consistent thinker. You need to be objective, dispassionate, and unbiased. You have to avoid personal preconceptions. Now, what is a preconception? The ideas you have before approaching a problem. For example, if you're going to do a study on people of some region and you have a preconceived notions of how they are, how they behave, then that research is going to be useless. You have to go in and you have to avoid your personal preconceptions, and then you have to go in with ardent curiosity. Curiosity is the key for approaching a research problem, because if you're not curious, you cannot find about problems. If you are not curious about something, you cannot go in depth. So curiosity is another key for approaching a problem, and that counts to a scientific attitude. Then we have the ability to rise from failure, patience, and self control. All are important. That is also because you can fail, you can go out, you can be rejected for interviews, people may avoid giving answers, you may not find the relevant text to analyze. All kinds of things happen, but persistence is the key. So, what is a research problem? Now, this is a basic question for today. A problem is a set of conditions needing discussion, solution, information. And a problem can be anything. It can be a condition which needs discussion. We can talk about it. We can talk about it in terms of information, or we can also talk about probable solutions. And it implies that it needs empirical investigation. And for example, when we talk about empirical investigation, we need data collection and analysis for it. And problem statement is more specific than a topic, and it limits the scope of a research problem, and that's very specific in approaching it. So a research problem is a question that a researcher wants to answer, or a problem that a researcher wants to solve. Now that's the key. For example, you see that media coverage is going in a wrong way. It's giving a false representation to people of particular ethnic group, and you believe that that's problematic because it's causing racism. So that's the beginning of your research. You started thinking about a problem and you want to find a solution by doing research, and you want to give suggestions how it leads to racism. So that's the beginning. It's like researcher wants to solve the problem, and now that's what we call it, unbiased research. But these days we can also call participatory research when it's critical in nature. And then a research problem is an issue or concern that an investigator or researcher presents and then justifies it in a research study. And he works on it, he tries to analyze the factors and give probable solutions, he justifies it through his theoretical and methodological framework. So that's what research problem is. It's the key. You start off with a question, you start off with a problem. Without a problem, research can never begin. So, as communication students, whenever you see a problem in a text, you see a problem in a media coverage, you see problems somewhere in newspapers, that's the beginning of your research. Uh, what we have seen that there's a lot of scare among research young students who believe that research can't be done. It's a difficult process. I assure you, if you can think about problems, if you have a critical ability to look into things, into coverages, into media domain, the problem with the organizations, how biased they are, which political groups they're giving coverage to, that's where you've started to be a good researcher. You just need scientific methods to go on about it. So the first step is identification and formulation of a research problem. Is basically the first step of the research process, and it's the most challenging and difficult phase of research process. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a piece of cake. You have to think about a problem, and then you have to think about approaching a problem, because everywhere we might go with a problem with our own biases that can create problems. So selection depends on many factors, and it depends on factors such as researcher's own knowledge, skill set, motivation, expertise, his time spent in the field. All these factors count in identifying your research problem. And a good research study needs a lot of time. And if you can give time to think about these things, it's going to help you in your research problem. So don't approach a problem in a hurry. Don't go covering or identifying a problem in haste, because that can be problematic. Go on, spend your time, work on it, read relevant literature, and then go about it. You may find some greater perspectives. So initially, every researchers faces a predicament of identifying, selecting, and formulating a good research problems. And in other words, we can say is that a research problem is an area of concern where there's a gap in the knowledge base, and this is where you come in. You see that there's a gap. No one has worked on ethnic representation, or no one has worked on racism, or no one has worked on biases of the news media organizations, and this is where you think you can fit in. That's the beginning of a research problem, and it's an area where you're trying to fill in the gap. The main purpose of the research is to fill the gap in the existing literature and contribute it for the further coming scholarly works that is presented in articles, books, or newspapers, or whatever. So that's where you fit in. And then we can say that the components of research basically is the relevance of the study, how relevant it is, what is the title of the study, and you can give the operational definitions of the variables, what are going to be your objectives, what is going to be your limitations, and obviously scope and limitations perform a key role, and these are the key components of a research problem. Scope, limitations, why your study will be useful. You need to justify that in order to be accepted at a bigger level. So, identification of a research problem. Now, this is a very, very important topic, and we need to see it that identification of the research problem is the first step. And a broad area is selected, and then it's basically you go on with a broader area, and then you select down and narrow it down to a specific statement, and which helps you in going about approaching a problem. So this is how you go on. Basically identify a problem, then you go on, select a broad area, and then you narrow it down, and then that's the basically you come down to a specific statement of a problem. And then we need to talk about the sources of a research problem. The first one can be a personal experience. Basically, you can identify a research problem based on your personal experiences, the time you spent somewhere, your interaction, you based on your past experiences, based on your educational experience. It can be anything. It can be your own personal experiences, but that can be a leading factor towards your identifying a research problem or approaching a research problem. And then you can another source of a research problem can be practical experience, and in our field it's very, very important. That's why I always ask my students to spend some time in the field of journalism and be a good journalist and spend some years, because it will help you give ideas about the media industry, about the challenges, about the pressures. So it's not just as simple as it can be seen. Journalists go through a lot of pressure. There's organizational pressure, there's field pressure. It can be from any corners. You can have threats, you can have any kinds of issues that can be dangerous. And journalists are working in an environment where there is less talked about mental health. So we hardly talk about that. These kind of practical experiences can give you ideas that yes, you can work on it. Because if you cannot spend your time in the field, you cannot be aware of what kind of traumas journalists go in war zones. So it can give you new ideas, new perspectives. So practical experience is the key. And I value researchers. I encourage my students to spend more time in the field and to interact more with journalists or organizations, because it will give you broader perspective and it will identify problems on its own. The moment you spend time somewhere, you can identify problems. So it helps a lot. Practical experience is a great source of research problem. Then we have a critical appraisal of literature. Obviously, the more you study, the more books you read, the more area you've identified. For example, if you're working in film studies, if you read different scholars, if you read the evolution of cinema, you can find where Pakistani cinema is going, how which theories can be applied, why, how the audience perceive the cinematic text. So it helps. Critical appraisal, literature helps a lot, and that's the key. And after this, we can talk about previous research. The fourth number is previous research. Obviously, the studies that have taken place, the many scholars who have worked in their domains. You can study research papers, you can study research articles, research books, and the previous research can also give you an idea that there's a gap in particular area. There's a gap that you need to identify, you need to talk about, and that gives you an idea that you can go on and pursue a research that has never been done before, or maybe contribute to the existing research, but you have identified gap based on previous research. If you can't study previous research, you can hardly identify gap, and no matter what research you do, you'll have to find out, you'll have to identify previous research in that area. That's how you come out with a conviction and strength, and you can identify and make your point that yes, you've studied. The mistake our students do, that they don't study previous researchers, they just come out on their own, they just write about things. That doesn't help. If you want to write about a topic, you need to go through previous research. The next one is existing theories, and theories also help. And remember that already the theories are set of principles. Obviously, we have talked about it in detail, and it's given by scholars of high caliber. But remember, nothing is fixed. Theories can be contested. Many theories, communication theories, have been challenged with time. Like the example I gave you previously was magic bullet theory, which said that the moment you see a television content, it immediately works on you like a needle or like a hypodermic needle. But it's not possible. It depends. Audience changed over the years. You cannot be influenced by text immediately. Number of factors play. So theories can be tested over a period of time, and you can come out and challenge them and come out with your own theories. But provided if you have a lot of points to prove and you are convinced that yes, many other scholars can test it as well. Testability is the key requirement of a theory. Then we have social issues. Why I'm talking about social issues, that research is done for the people of this world, and it must address the social issues of this world. Your theory is not meant for aliens. Your theory is meant for the people, for people living in the society. So you need to focus on social issues, and social issues give you a lot of insight, and it can be a great source of a research problem. If you see a problem existing in some culture, society, particular region, rural, urban, no matter where it is, you can go on and pursue it. It's a great source of a research problem. And then we have brainstorming. It can come up from various sources. It can be in your academic session. It can be meeting your peers. It can be having some online webinar discussion, attending a seminar where you come across scholarly people. You discuss something. There are brainstorming sessions, and you ask for some critical thinking. You come up with ideas. It helps a lot, and that's why I encourage my students to attend a lot of webinars and seminars. It gives you an idea where the world of research is going, where your own domain is going, how people in your field are contributing towards journals, sciences, how the ideas are being generated through discussions. So brainstorming is the key, and we need to have some regular sessions where we can have some brainstorming session. We tried this. We came up with some ideas in our class. We divided it into groups, and you came up with some very good ideas. That was the brainstorming session, and I'm looking forward to some of the brainstorming session in the coming days. Maybe we take some on the Zoom where we can talk about it. We'll be taking some online Zoom sessions as well. So let's see. The next one is intuition. Maybe you have some guts, maybe you have some feeling, maybe you have some sixth sense which predicts that if this is going to happen, that it can happen like this, or something bad can happen, or something good. You have a feeling, intuitive feeling, and that can also be a source of research problem, because you believe that if this thing continues, if, for example, a particular group is marginalized for a long period of time, it may lead to rebellion, it may cause protest or something like that. That is called intuition, that you can foresee things. And it's very important as a researcher to foresee things and to predict things as well. So that is another source of a research problem. So I hope that you are aware that all these points can help you. Your beginning from the first one, personal experience, or practical experience, critical appraisal, previous research, existing theories, social issues, brainstorming, intuition. All these points can be a great source of a research problem. But importantly, again, practical experience matters a lot. Now, why I'm saying this in our field experience provides ample opportunities, and it gives you a way that you can identify problems. And it serves as a great resource of identifying research problems. For example, that media coverage in regions give you better insights, whether the coverage was biased, how people were represented, were they shown in limelight, were they ignored, because they say that stereotyping takes place in a number of ways, and one way can be by over representing people, by underrepresenting people, or by not showing them at all. So how do you see that? Practical experiences show you how to approach a problem in a much better way. So going along these lines, um, literature is another one, whether when one looks at books and articles and summaries related to the subject of our interest, the pertinent questions may arise. The more we read, the more articles we read, the more books we read, the better questions we are going to have, and we need literature in approaching a problem. Without literature, it's impossible. You cannot. You need to have some good idea about the problem you're going in, and you need to study some previous literature about it, and that's very important. Previous research, as I said, is a body of knowledge. It's developed on sound research findings. People have contributed, people have spent time, and building upon those previous work, you stand on the shoulder of giants, as they say, and then you give your own input. Because the more you study previous authors, the better conviction you're going to have behind your work, and you can see better because people before you have already invested time. And basically, this will help you in your shortcomings on the previous research can help you for better investigations. So another point that we need to keep in mind is the importance of existing theories, and for that, research is a process of theory development and theory testing, and your research must go through a theory development and it must test a theory, because even if you're analyzing a problem, you need to test it in the light of theory. It's different from natural sciences where they go on about experimenting, they have their own way. But in social sciences, it's very important that you develop a theory and then you test the theory, and you analyze your facts, because tomorrow your research can be tested by other scholars through the work, through theory development that you've done, and through theory testing that you've done. And if an existing theory is used in developing a research problem, a specific statement from theory must be isolated, and then generally a part or parts of theory are subjected to testing in a clinical situation. But in social sciences, as I said, we need to rely on theory a lot. And testing of a theory is needed because it serves as a good source of a research problem. Now, explaining the social problems. Sometimes issues of global contemporary political issues are suggested. It helps us. Uh, we may see problems around us, contemporary, political, economical, and it may provide a very good beginning for our research problem. And an idea for a research may stem from familiarity with social concerns or controversial social issues. The more you see these controversial issues, it will help you in familiarizing yourself with the research problem. Then the next one that we need to talk about in this context is a picture that you can see now. Now, it's very important to look at this picture in depth, because if you see there's a research problem and you can see it touches upon social concerns, popular issues, brainstorming, and all the things that we talked about, experiences. And this is why we say that it's important that research problem is dynamic. It's not just a simple thing that you just come across thinking about a problem and you think that, oh, this is it, this is my research problem. No, it is a very complicated process. The thing is that it's one of the most difficult process. It's the beginning of a research. The moment you think about a problem, it's the beginning of a research, but it's a complicated process, which is why I advise my students not to rush it, not to go in haste about it, and that's why it's important to approach it And that's why multiple factors count in this research problem. So now looking, before we just close up this session of today's, we must summarize, and it's important to look into research problem that it's a specific issue, difficulty, contradiction, or gap in the knowledge that you will aim to address in your research. A research problem is about a specific issue, it's about difficulty, it's more about gap in the knowledge, and that's what basically you are going to address in your research. And it also depends on your broad topic of research or interest. And it depends on your broad interest, what you want to do, which area it is, what fascinates you, what you're driven by. Remember, research is mainly it mainly depends upon your personal interest. The more you're keen, the more you're curious, the more you want to work on, it's going to help you in doing in a very good research. So your curiosity, your broader interest is the key here. So what is a research problem? And let's summarize all this. That a research problem or phenomena is, as it might be called, is basically a form of qualitative research that you would like to address, investigate, or study, whether descriptively or experimentally. This is just summarizing again. It's more about the topic that you're going into, and it's basically addressing, investigating, or studying. Basically, you're going to go about it, and through qualitative research. And it is the focus or reason for engaging in your research. It is typically a topic, phenomena, or challenge that you're interested in. As you've discussed previously, it's about your own interest, about the topic you're interested in. There's a challenge that you see around you in the society, in your social circle, or media text or whatever. So that's what you want to focus on, and that's what the problem you see, and you want to work on it. You will focus on it. So that's basically a research problem. And then we can also say that what I'm looking for, that is also the research problem, is basically the objective of a study. It is the general question the researcher is trying to answer. Basically, what we say is that the research problem is a question that you're trying to answer. It's looking for a general question. You see a problem and you want to find an answer to it. And a better explanation for that can be that it expresses and crystallizes the researcher's knowledge and the subject of inquiry, a key element in the whole research process. Basically, the researcher's knowledge is basically necessarily a key element in the whole research process, and it crystallizes the researcher's knowledge. And that's an important point that you need to consider, that research problem crystallizes the researcher's knowledge target. It's a subject of inquiry and it's a key element in the whole research process. And it provides guidelines by which researchers can question the aspects of reality they have decided to study, or can develop an understanding of reality. So they're trying to focus on that. So basically, these are the key points that you can think about. This is just a summary of what we have read. Basically, research problem is basically, in layman words, a simple problem that you see. It comes from your experience, it can come from your knowledge, it can come from the literature that you've studied, it can be based on your personal experience, it can come from anywhere. You see a problem, you want to address the problem, and that's what you're going to approach it in a scientific way. So, this is basically your research problem, and that's where research begins with. And it's not as simple as it sounds. So, before we close our session, what do you think about research problem? What are different sources which can help identify a problem? Do you see any problem which you think that can be taken as a research topic? What is your mind? Any problem that you see based on your experience, based on your study, based on the media that you see, the media content that you see? So all that counts in to produce questions. So you can think about all these questions. There are many more questions, but I'll ask you to think about the brainstorming sessions that we had in our class. I would also ask you to join a Zoom session in case these topics are a little difficult for you. You can ask questions. We'll try to do some brainstorming sessions about the problems you see with media, about the problem in media content, We'll talk more about it in a Zoom session where we'll be live. There'll be Q&A answers. So I'll try to answer most of your queries. But the important thing before I wind up this session, that you need to be curious. You need to see problems in media. You need to have some bit of conviction behind what you're thinking. And that's basically where we start off with a research problem. So don't be scared, don't be afraid of approaching bigger targets or bigger media topics. You can go about anywhere. There's no particular way of starting research. We can start from anywhere. So if there's confusion, you can always talk, and we'll try to sort it out in the coming days. And I'm looking forward to the live session that we'll have. So let's see. Keep your questions for that, and we'll discuss it. So hopefully you enjoyed this session. A pretty detailed one about research problem. It's the key. It's where the research begins. And as a critical scholars, you need to think about problems so we can go about it. So I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much. Have a very good day. We'll be in touch. These are some references, and thank you very much again. Have a great day. Thanks.